Mr. Genuis for 5 minutes.
Chair, Indigenous leaders have said that Indigenous identity fraud is rampant in this program, but no one has been held accountable. And I want to come back to that. Nobody has been held accountable by the government for Indigenous identity fraud. And let's zero in on one famous example, MP Randy Boissonneau. Now, his company, Global Health Imports, misrepresented their Indigenous identity. We know that now. There's no debate. They made a claim to be Indigenous. That claim was false. First question, has the Indigenous identity fraud of Randy Boissonneau's company been referred to the RCMP?
I believe I answered this question at my last committee appearance just a few weeks ago. The company in question, GHI, was never on the Indigenous business procurement list, and I believe Minister Duclos has additional information about.
Yeah, just before you chime in, Mr. Duclos, my question is very specific. We know they engage in Indigenous identity fraud in order to increase their chance of getting business from the government. That's fraud. Has this case been referred to the RCMP?
Monsieur le député Genuis, je pense qu'avant.
Mr. MP Genuis, I think when we describe things, we have to be careful of the language that we use. You've said it's a fraud. You would need to prove this, and I can assure you that if there had been fraud, there is in the government, in an independent way, mechanisms to ensure that these cases of fraud be dealt with in the proper manner.
Referring to the RCMP, but I am a bit struck, Mr. Duclos, that you think I should be careful saying that they committed fraud. They claim to be an Indigenous-owned business. They are not an Indigenous-owned business, but in the process of pursuing a contract with the Government of Canada, they falsely claim to be Indigenous. How is there any doubt about whether or not that is fraudulent?
Ce n'est pas aux politiciens comme nous sommes de déterminer.
It's not up to politicians that we are to determine whether there's any fraud.
En cours de justice artificielle, je pense qu'on doit faire confiance aux experts.
I think we have to trust the experts. Mr. Carr, it's really difficult to hear the minister.
Like he wasn't answering the question, I jumped in.
Monsieur le Président, je pense que
this farce is not allowed to go on at any other committee, Mr. Chair. So can you tell them to be quiet and let people actually do their work?
Mr. Genuis, the witness, the minister, was in the middle of answering the question that you asked, and then before he could actually get to the answer, you interrupted him. I understand that there are times where you want to ask a pointed question, and that is very much the practice and procedure of committees, but it's very important that we don't have the crosstalk because of the interpretation and also because of members that might have challenges hearing. So I just want to remind members not to be cross-talking because of the health impacts, which we've been warned about many times on committees and in the House. But with that, Mr. Genuis, you have a little,
yes,
2 minutes and 45
seconds. So I'll
just
give the minister one more chance to answer the question. You have a company that I think quite clearly engaged in Indigenous identity fraud. You might say, well, maybe it wasn't quite fraud. Maybe they just lied in order to try to steal money from the taxpayers, but it wasn't really fraud. Have you referred information about this case to the RCMP?
Je dirais qu'il y a le droit et la responsabilité.
You have the right to your opinions, and we have the responsibility of validating whether there is fraud, and that responsibility has been put into operation in an independently, a politically independent way.
Were you responsible for terminating the government's contract with Round Point Consulting?
Pardon me. The contract with Round Point Consulting was terminated by the contracting authorities of Indigenous Services Canada, as the contracting authorities would in any situation.
Who made that decision?
It was any decision to terminate would be between the program authority, which is who I am, and the contracting authority.
So you made the decision?
Sorry?
So you made the decision?
So it's a joint decision between myself and contracting authorities.
Why was that decision made?
The decision was made because the work that was being done under that contract had changed significantly from when it was put in place, and the statement of work that had been used to award that contract no longer reflected accurately what the contractors were doing, and the work essentially had diminished Was not required.
Okay, they were in the middle of doing an audit into Canadian Healthcare Agency, and according to reports in the Globe and Mail, the government, so you, told them to no longer look into indigeneity claims of companies. Is that true?
No, what you just stated is not factual.
Is the Globe and Mail story correct?
The audit was done in 2016. The termination of the contract occurred in 2023, and the changes to the process, including who was verifying indigeneity, occurred in 2022.
Is there anything in the Globe and Mail story on this that you dispute?
Yes.
It's to you.
I think that sometimes people, their opinions reflected in that article reflect the opinions of Mr. Gary Hardle.
Is there anything in the article that you dispute?
I think, Mr. Chair, the
no,
official
my questions are for Ms.
I am the minister,
Sultan.
and I get to direct how the questions are
No,
answered
you don't.
and asked. Actually,
no, you don't.
I do.
Actually, you don't.
I do.
Stop.
So, Mr. Genuis, your time is ready.
Mr. Chair, it's obvious what you're trying to do. That the official responsible for this didn't want to answer the question, so the minister jumped in to prevent her from needing to answer it. It's obvious to everyone what's going on.
That is not accurate, Mr. Chair. And the member of Parliament is, I would say, has asked the question, has received an answer. And what I would also say is that he asked this question of me earlier, and I have given him a clear answer.
Mr. Chair, who has the floor?
Because, Mr. Chair, that it's unfortunate that civil
I
servants
asked a question
are
of an
being treated this way.
official about very
Genuis?
serious allegations, and I didn't get an answer.
So, Mr. Genuis, your time has elapsed here.
Yeah.
There will likely be another opportunity to ask a question.
Well, that is very revealing, Chair, and everybody
to...
saw what happened, that the official refused to answer the question, and the minister jumped in to try to save her.
We're moving on.
Actually, that's not accurate, Mr. Chair, and the official would like to speak
what
at
happened.
this point. Mr. Chair, this is not respectful of officials that are working on behalf of Canadians.
And you can let them answer the question.
We're moving on to our next question here, Mr. But I'll give the official the opportunity to answer this, but we're over time here, and then we're moving on.
Order.
But first, we have a point of order from Mr. McLeod.
Mr. Chair, you're allowing people to speak over each other. I have a hearing issue. Today I brought my device for captions, and I'm still struggling to follow because there's too many voices coming on. If we could just restrict it to whoever's on the microphone, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Thank you for reminding members, Mr. McLeod. Of course, we need to limit the crosstalk here, both for interpretation and people that have hearing challenges. And I see on the same point of order we have Monsieur Lemire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais aussi...
Thank you, Chair. I also want to repeat that for Francophones who are listening to the debate, the interpretation is fundamentally important, and to speak over witnesses decreases the understanding we can have of the debate. I thank the interpreters for their patience and their dedication, and several times they've said that it's very difficult to interpret. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Lemire.
Just a very brief answer from Ms. Sultan, and then we'll be moving on to Mr. Batiste.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond. I think that the allegations in that article are very troubling and need to be taken very seriously. There are multiple pieces of information in that article with which I disagree and have a different point of view.
Thank you very much, Mr. Genuis.